T-minus 1 minute. But oxygen and liquid hydrogen fill and drain valves are closed. T-minus 40 seconds, handing off to Atlantis' computers at T-minus 31. T-minus 35, 33.
Clock will hold at T-minus 31 seconds due to a failure.
And we have had a failure. Grand launch sequencer.
We had a problem on the GOGS retract switches. NTDSP. Go ahead. Yes, sir. We need guys to go do the verification per the LCC, please.
All right, CMAC?
Yes, CMAC. The LCC says we need to verify using a camera, and we're positioning camera 62 right now.
Okay, let us know as soon as 62 is swung over and you can verify LCC for GVA retract, please.
And all personnel, we're holding here 31 seconds while we get verification that the GVA has fully retracted per our pre-plan.
This is CMAC. We verify retracted.
Okay, and you can verify that it is fully retracted per the instructions that we've been that we developed, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and SPE?
And NTD, SPE concurs. They satisfy the requirements of GSC 13 pre-plan contingency. I am go.
Okay, I copy. And launch director?
Yes, sir. I heard all that and concur. Press on.
All right, very good.
NTD, ST.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I need concurrence to GLS and mass to clear the hold, please.
Very good. And GLS, you have concurrence? Go.
Copy that. It's in work.
Thank you. Let us know when that's complete.
NTD, we have it in work.
All right, guidance.
And just a reminder for folks, our lock spin back hold time is 3 minutes and 16 seconds.
NTD, CTLS on 212. We're ready to go.
All right, very good. And launch director, with that cleanup, we're going to go ahead and proceed.
Yes, sir. Please do.
All right, and all personnel, we are going to pick up the clock here momentarily. And GLS, you can resume the clock on your mark.
Copy that. Countdown clock will resume on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark.
T-minus.
Go for auto sequence start.
Handoff to Atlantis' computers has occurred. Solid rocket booster nozzle steering check and work.
20.
Firing chain is armed.
15.
Go for main engine start. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. The final liftoff of Atlantis on the shoulders of the space shuttle. America will continue the dream.
Program, Houston.
Roger roll, Atlantis. Houston now controlling the flight of Atlantis. The space shuttle spreads its wings one final time for the start of a sentimental journey into history. 24 seconds into the flight, roll program complete. Atlantis now heads down, wings level on the proper alignment for its 8.5-minute ride to orbit. 4.5 million pounds of hardware and humans taking aim on the International Space Station. 40 seconds into the flight, the 3 liquid fuel main engines throttling back to 72% of rated performance in the bucket, reducing stress on the shuttle as it goes transonic for the final time. Engines now revving up, standing by for the throttle up call.
Atlantis, go at throttle up, no action, DPDT.
Go with throttle up, no action on DPDT.
That call from Capcom Barry Wilmore, a transducer, instrumentation only, no action required. Atlantis now 15 miles in altitude, already 16 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center, 1 minute 40 seconds into the flight. Atlantis flexing its muscles one final time. Atlantis traveling almost 2,600 miles an hour, 21 miles in altitude, 24 miles downrange. Standing by for solid rocket booster separation. Booster officer confirms staging a good solid rocket booster separation. Guidance now converging. The main engine steering the shuttle on a pinpoint path to its preliminary orbit. 2 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight. Atlantis already traveling 3,200 miles an hour, 35 miles in altitude, 50 miles downrange. The propulsion officer reports the orbital maneuvering system engines have ignited. Atlantis kicking on its afterburners for 1 minute, 23 seconds for the final phase of powered flight.
Atlantis, 2-engine towel.
However, Atlantis' 3 engines performing perfectly. 4 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight. Atlantis currently traveling 5,500 miles an hour, 62 miles in altitude, almost 200 miles downrange. 4 minutes of powered flight remaining. Atlantis speeding straight as an arrow toward its date with the International Space Station Sunday morning. Coming up on the 5-minute mark. Atlantis now traveling 6,500 miles an hour, 66 miles in altitude, 250 miles downrange.
Atlantis, press to ATO.
Press to ATO.
That call indicating we can make minimal orbital targets in the event of an engine failure. All 3 engines continue to function normally. Atlantis will begin its slow roll to a heads-up position shortly. Five and a half minutes into the flight. Atlantis traveling 7,700 miles an hour, 315 miles downrange.
Atlantis, single engine, ops 3.
Single engine ops 3.
And the guidance officer here in Mission Control confirms that the computers are commanding the main engines to swivel.
Zaragoza, 104.
Single engine Zaragoza 104.
We've rolled to a heads-up position now, providing better communications to the tracking and data relay satellite system as Atlantis heads uphill. 6 minutes, 20 seconds into the flight.
Atlantis, press to MECO.
Press to MECO.
That call indicates that we can make our normal orbital cutoff targets in the event of an engine failure. However, all 3 main engines continue to function normally.
Nominal. Fergie, go the +X, go the pitch.
the set-down plane. Go for the +X, go for the pitch.
That call indicating that we will be in good shape for the orientation of Atlantis for external tank photography following main engine cutoff. Now 7 minutes into the flight. One minute, 20 seconds till main engine cutoff. Atlantis traveling 12,000 miles an hour. The main engines will soon be throttling down once again to limit the stress on the shuttle and its 4 crew members to that of 3 times the effective gravity. Atlantis currently traveling at a speed of more than 4 miles a second. 1 minute of powered flight remaining for Atlantis. Three good main engines, 3 good auxiliary power units, 3 good fuel cells. Approaching the 8-minute mark into the flight. Atlantis now traveling more than 15,000 miles an hour. Eight minutes, 15 seconds into the flight, standing by for main engine cutoff. That'll be followed a few seconds later by the separation of the external fuel tank. Booster officer confirms main engine cutoff. For the last time, the Space Shuttle's main engines have fallen silent as the shuttle slips into the final chapter of a storied 30-year adventure. Now standing by for external tank separation. Atlantis off the tank. Commander Chris Ferguson will be maneuvering Atlantis now into an orientation to enable Sandy Magnus to capture digital still imagery of the external fuel tank as it drifts away.
So OHMS 1 is not required. Your preliminary OHMS 2 TIG, 37 minutes.
37 minutes, no OHMS 1 required, thanks.
This is Mission Control Houston. Atlantis safely in its preliminary orbit. Following a flawless launch from the Kennedy Space Center, albeit about 2.5 minutes late at 10:29 a.m. Central Time. The launch slightly delayed while engineers at the Kennedy Space Center confirmed the complete retraction of the gaseous vent arm at the launch pad. Commander Chris Ferguson is currently orienting Atlantis into the proper attitude to enable Sandy Magnus to capture digital still imagery of the external fuel tank as it drifts away for the final time. Atlantis currently in an orbit of 140 by 36 statute miles. That's the preliminary orbit that will be increased in altitude at its apogee through the firing of the orbital maneuvering system engines 26 minutes from now.
ready for MPS TVC ISO.
That's affirmative, Chunky. We are ready. Chunky, also, after you get those closed, we'll be ready for APU hide shutdown. On 3-4, the only delta is tele-only control is not required. And when you get ready for Ops 105, we are ready as well.
Full copy, APU hide shutdown. On 3-4, except tail-only control not required, and we're ready for 105.
That's a good readback.
This is Mission Control Houston here in the shuttle flight control room. Post-insertion activities underway under the direction of Ascent Flight Director Richard Jones, second from your right, who presided over all of the work that was done associated with making sure that the weather was acceptable for launch from a return to launch site abort standpoint for the Spaceflight Meteorology Group. On the far right, Flight Director Tony Sacacci, he will preside over Atlantis' final entry 12 days from now. Butch Wilmore, Barry Wilmore, the Capcom, the spacecraft's communicator, in the dark shirt, and on the far left, Lee Archambault, the astronaut who was in direct contact with Deputy Chief Astronaut Rick Sturckow. Sturckow was assessing the weather and real-time observations as he flew the shuttle training aircraft around the vicinity of the Kennedy Space Center in the final hours prior to launch. Handshakes all around here in the shuttle flight control room. As we move into the post-insertion time frame, the initial phase of getting Atlantis set up for orbital operations, the countdown clocks here in Mission Control currently ticking backward to the first firing of the orbital maneuvering system engines in what is known as the OMS 2 burn. Just a bit under 22 minutes from now, that will begin to raise the orbit, the apogee of Atlantis' orbit. Essentially, the launch itself was the first rendezvous maneuver to catch up to the International Space Station for a docking on Sunday morning. With Atlantis in the early minutes of its final flight, and the final flight in the history of the shuttle program, we're going to go back down now to the Kennedy Space Center at the launch site for replays of today's launch that occurred at 10:29 a.m. Central Time.
TIG of 37:45, we like that, and no deltas to 3-6 or 3-7.
3-5 and subsequent in work.
Thanks, Atlantis. We're watching.
Hey, Easton, just to tag up with you, we show ourselves complete through the MPS power down, just waiting on your go when the time comes.
Okay, we are ready for MPS power down when on time, and if you could check the MPS pneumatic helium isolt at GPC, that should get them.
Okay, pneumatic helium isolt to GPC. Thanks for the check.
As we watch the replays of Atlantis' final launch, Capcom Barry Wilmore talking to Commander Chris Ferguson on board Atlantis. The main propulsion system has been shut down. The external tank umbilical doors have closed. The auxiliary power units have been shut down. Everything going well. Less than 22 minutes following Atlantis' launch. The crew on board Atlantis will be busy over the course of the next several hours setting up shop on board the orbiter, activating payload buses, breaking out laptop computers, preparing for the opening of the payload bay doors, after which the ascend team of flight controllers will assess all of Atlantis' systems for a go for on-orbit operations. A slightly longer workday than usual for the crew of Atlantis, since there are only 4 crew members on board instead of the usual 6 or 7. Later in the day, the checkout of the shuttle's robotic arm, along with other activities preparatory to the inspection that will take place of Atlantis' thermal protection system tomorrow, standard customary operations for the second day of any shuttle flight.
Houston, Atlantis, MPS power down is complete, and with that, we would like to thank the Pratt & Whitney Rocketdyne team and the SSME team for their flawless performance over this 30-year shuttle flight history. 135 flights. It's a 7,000-pound engine that puts out 1.5 million pounds of thrust, and they pitch the equivalent of a perfect game every flight. From everyone who's ridden on these rockets, we thank you.
We concur with that assessment, Atlantis. Good and pertinent and true words.
We're putting ET umbilical door closure in work, but
Mechanical Systems Officer here in Mission Control watching over the closing of the external tank umbilical doors. Words of compliment from pilot Doug Hurley for all of the propulsion system engineers who presided over 135 flights of the space shuttle, and the performance of space shuttle main engines, the external fuel tank, the solid rocket boosters that propelled these vehicles, and hundreds of humans to orbit. The external tank umbilical doors now closed and latched, confirmed by the Mechanical Systems Officer here in Mission Control. Atlantis soon to maneuver into the correct orientation for the firing of the orbital maneuvering system engines about 9 minutes from now, the OMS 2 burn that will help to refine Atlantis's altitude as it now begins its trek to catch up to and dock with the International Space Station on Sunday.
Hey, Houston, we're ready for the maneuver if you are.
Affirmative, Atlantis, we are ready.
Atlantis now beginning to maneuver into the correct orientation for the firing of the orbital maneuvering system engines 7.5 minutes from now. This will be a firing of both orbital maneuvering system engines at the rear of the shuttle that flank the vertical tail fin. The firing of this OMS 2 burn, as it is called, about 1 minute 4 seconds in duration. This is Mission Control Houston, less than 2 minutes away from the orbital maneuvering system burn to increase Atlantis' altitude. This will be a 1 minute 4 second firing of both orbital maneuvering system engines. The guidance, navigation, and control officer reports Atlantis is in a good configuration for the burn, as does the propulsion officer here in Mission Control.
Houston, we think we're in a good config for the burn.
That's affirmative, Atlantis. We show you in a good config for the OMS 2 burn.
Standing by for the firing of the orbital maneuvering system engines. And the propulsion officer reports that the OMS 2 burn is underway.
We see a good burn, Atlantis. No further trim is required. We'll meet you in the post-OMS 2 tab.
Copy and concur. Thanks, Houston.
And as we watch the replay of Atlantis separating from its external fuel tank following its launch almost 40 minutes ago, the confirmation from Capcom Barry Wilmore here in Mission Control to Commander Chris Ferguson that we've had a good firing of the orbital maneuvering system engines, the OMS 2 burn helping to refine Atlantis' altitude as it begins its trek on the road for its 2-day chase to catch up to the International Space Station. Atlantis now at an altitude of 143 by 98 statute miles.
Here comes the gimbal check, Houston.
We are watching. And Chunky, no deltas to your post-burn reconfig.
Copy, no delta.
This is Mission Control Houston, now back here at the Johnson Space Center. The ascent team of flight controllers on duty, led by Flight Director Richard Jones, along with spacecraft communicator Barry Wilmore, following the launch of Atlantis 42 minutes ago, following a very, very slight delay while the ground launch sequencer at the Kennedy Space Center verified that the gaseous vent arm, the Beanie Cap, if you will, was fully retracted from the top of the orbiter's external fuel tank. With the launch having been completed, the first major maneuver of the flight, the OMS 2 burn of the orbital maneuvering system engines, has just been accomplished. Atlantis now flying at an altitude of 143 by 97 statute miles in pursuit of the International Space Station, flying from northwest to southeast in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator.
On 5-3 if you're ready.
Affirmative, we are ready for 106, Fergie.
Houston, contact from the mid-deck. How do you copy?
Sandy, we have you loud and clear. How us?
Very good. I have you loud and clear as well.
Yeah, it's good talking to you, Sandy.
Mission Specialist Sandy Magnus now out of her seat on the flight deck, having made her way down to the middeck to begin the preliminary configuration of the systems down there. In the meantime, Rex Walheim will be working to begin the configuration of the aft flight deck hardware. Commander Chris Ferguson and pilot Doug Hurley will be checking out the shuttle's robotic arm, unfurling it from the port sill of the shuttle's payload bay at about the 6.5-hour mark into the mission, performing a checkout of its systems before it is used tomorrow to grapple the orbiter boom sensor system for the initial inspection of Atlantis' thermal protection system.
Hey, Houston, we show ourselves complete with the ascent checklist. If you agree, we'll meet you in post-insertion.
We do agree with that, Atlantis. And while I got you, Fergie, if you'd like to set up a timer for your NC1 TIG, it's at 3:39.
3 hours, 39 minutes. We appreciate that. Thanks.
You bet.
Here in the Space Shuttle Flight Control Room, the ascent team looking over the shoulders of Atlantis' quartet as they begin to set up shop for at least a dozen days of on-orbit operations. For those keeping track, the exact liftoff time for Atlantis on its final mission was 10:29 and 3.9 seconds Central Time, 10:29 and 3.9 seconds Central Time today. Just about 2 minutes and change behind schedule, while the Kennedy Space Center held the countdown clock at the T-minus 31-second mark, just before the ground launch sequencer would do the handoff to the shuttle's onboard computers to verify the full retraction of the Beanie Cap, or the Gaseous Vent Arm, that is located at the top of the shuttle's external fuel tank.
Hey, Houston, we're ready for Block 1. Any deltas?
Good question, Fergie. There are no deltas. As you recall, though, we will be going single G2.
Absolutely. Single G2, no deltas, and here we go.
We are watching.